Sup YouTube? It's another solo video from me, and I got a haircut, I got acne, I got a bunch of stuff. Anyways, I thought I would just come on here and build like a Lego set that reminds me of my childhood, because it's like kind of like a re-release of something that came out um back, I think stuff's I don't say, yeah, it's like 2007, 2006. It was like a clone battle pack. Yeah, it was like amazing. Yeah. Anyways, let us begin. This is pretty cool because that's like I forget what they call it, thermal a detonator thing, thermal detonator, something like that. I forget the precise like Star Wars lingo for it, but yeah, I don't know. Um, I was on Instagram Threads like a few days ago, not a few days ago, like a few weeks ago. I don't know why I said days. It's been like weeks now. It's probably not that long. I have like a messed up perception of time. Um, but yeah, I was talking to this one guy who thought that I feel like this kind of isn't working too well because you can't see the build, but it's in my hand, and I feel like this kind of defeats the purpose. But anyways, um, he was saying like it was some atheist who said something like God doesn't exist, or like, okay, hold on, the post said something like after 2,000 years, the best religion can come up with is like this book that you just kind of have to believe, and that's like the best argument they have the existence of God. Something along those lines. I forget exactly what. Um, so I was like, kind of like trolling, but also kind of serious. Um, I commented like a proof of Planet Gus ontological argument that's given in the Blackwell Companion to Natural Theology. Again, just to like troll a bit. And some guy he said that like, oh, this is modal collapse, modal collapse. Um, I don't think it's modal collapse. I mean, because modal collapse is like um, P necessarily entails necessary, or P entails necessary P. That's modal collapse, but this is just possible. Possible P entails possible. No, my bad. Possible P entails necessary P. I don't know how to put this in. That is like a difference between like that isn't like modal collapse in the sense that like the proper thing is P entails necessary P. Then someone also like objects to like the ontological arguments, or at least Planegus one, because it said like it commits the what's it called? It's I am dumb. I probably should have script wrote a script for this, but I'm just winging it. But anyways, he says it commits the what's it called? The I forget what it's called. It's like the fallacy where like you go in equivocation fallacy, and that's just when like you define a word one way, and then like in the argument you define it the second way. Uh, I don't think that's a good objection to like the ontological arguments, because like again the objection lies in that like he says that there exists a maximally great being, and people have like this notion of it in their head, which is okay. So like this is like all power, like this being would be all powerful, all good, so on and so on. And then he says that that's how most people like think of it. But then he adds necessary being into the definition, which again I think that also fails, because if you look at like just the argument itself, or at least the proof of it, um, it's not that like Planet Ghost, like, okay, I put it this way, Planet Ghost kind of vague in the beginning when it comes to like this all them maximally great being. He just says it's possible that exists, and throughout the course of the argument, he's actively defining what a maximally great being is. quite literally in the proof, the second premise is what like it maximal great being would entail. That would be like all good, all knowing, all powerful, so on and so on. I mean, I think he only uses those three, but yeah. Actually, I don't think it's like it's either the second or third. It's early on though. It's one of the premises. Yeah. Then last podcast episode, I talked about the Deuterocanon. I'm not really a big fan of like the arguments I gave. I mean, I'm not a big fan how I articulate the arguments in that episode. But yeah, it's mainly something along the lines that's like Enoch and the other like apocryphal slash um, pagan works, because like Paul does quote a few pagans in the New Testament. Um, those are merely quotations to get a point across. It then like the references to Sirach in Wisdom of Solomon are more like embedded in the text and more, I would say, like essential for the text than these like mere illusions. So yeah, that's part of the arguments. I was with like a friend after class Monday talking about this, and he said that like in the Protestant tradition, this is a shock trooper. Anyways, he said that in the Protestant tradition, um, scriptures written by like either prophets or like the people associated with prophets. Like yes, but like I feel like that's really vague. It's like, what does prophet like? What do you mean by prophet? Because it could be this like you can most people would say like, oh, someone could like predict the future, but that's not necessarily what's going on. Heiser, yeah, I think it's Heiser who once said that like calls prophets not necessarily like people who can predict the future, or actually people who speak, who are mouthpieces for God, who again tells them what the future is going to be like. But rather he calls them what you call it, um, covenant enforcers. So like when you think of like the prophets in the Old Testament, they weren't merely they didn't all necessarily talk about like the future. They did do that, like I'm not denying that, but like um they like that wasn't all that they did, and that was like the end of their job. They also like correct the kings and make sure that, like they were telling people to stay um, faithful to God, keep the covenant, so on and so forth. So this is where like the idea of covenant enforcer comes from. But yeah, there's like ambulances outside my house. They always I always hear like ambulances, especially during the night when I'm trying to sleep. But actually, I don't know if that's an ambulance or a fire truck, but it's one or the other. And the reason is I live like near like a fire station. So yeah. Then yeah. If then like he also said, like my friend also said something along the lines of actually I forgot. Like he said that like in Maccabees it says that like no prophet at the time of the Maccabeans was around. But again, I here it's again what does the guy mean by prophet? And it's like that doesn't exclude the fact that there could be like a prophet afterwards, and that being the guy who wrote Maccabees or Sirach. It then like if you even read like the Deuterocanons, canons, they do kind of have this covenant enforcers, like they kind of do function like as these covenant enforcers. So there's that as well. Um, yeah, and it's, like if you're wondering why I like have to like slow down when I speak, it's like growing up, I first like I always went to like this speech um these classes in like elementary school to help me improve my speech. It worked, but not completely. So like I still have to like watch how I speak, and for some reason always get like L's and R's mixed up. So I might like if I speak too fast, yeah, I'm like covenant enforcers. I'm like covenant enforcers, stuff like that, or purple. I don't do it too often. Like I don't do it as much as I did back when I was a kid, but like not even as a kid, younger. Because I remember I kept like I still did this when I was like 18, but I didn't do it like consciously. It was um, if I said like purple, like fast enough, and not like that's like without paying much attention, I would say something like pulpo, pulper, or like something like that, pulper. Um, it's hard. I feel like it's hard to like replicate it, especially because it doesn't sound as organic as it did when I was like younger. But es quodest, yeah. Um, no, but then like there is also like this like futuristic prophecy in both Sirach and in someone's messaging me, both in Sirach and in Wisdom of Solomon, like I showed in the podcast episode. This one, the passage in Wisdom chapter 2, where the guy who, again, we don't know who wrote Wisdom, um, but the guy who wrote Wisdom talks about like the righteous person, and to some degree that is talking about like all righteous people at all times. But like you really don't see a righteous person. At least this is my perspective on it. Before Christ, before Jesus, who would like call God their father, and like people got upset over this. And then there's also like in the Orthodox tradition, there is. I mean, this is also like in some modern scholars also do this, where they talk about typology, and that is like a valid way of interpreting scripture. And Matthew does this a lot in his gospel as well. So like when in chapter 1, actually it's chapter 2, my bad, he talks about how like when Jesus goes into like when Joseph takes Jesus into Egypt, it then like when he takes him out again, or I don't want to say that sounds weird, when once after like their period in Egypt is done, he takes Jesus and Mary back to Judea. It quotes the like Matthew quotes the Old Testament and says that this fulfills this prophecy in Isaiah. And this is the famous I love actually I'm not sure if it's famous, but it's like if you're listening to this you might know it. It's the verse that says I love Egypt, have I called my son. In that is a verse from Hosea. This is staff spear. Um in the passage isn't like in the original passage, it's not messianic prophecy. That's talking about the exile, not the exile, the exodus from Egypt. So like this shows that like Matthew like thought of scripture not in the same way that like most people would, but that like there is like I don't want to say symbolism because I feel like that's not like the right word to use, but there is like these are types for Christ, and Christ is the archetype who feels like like these other what these stories are pointing to. So again, there is that aspect to it. So there is typological, though someone might say it's more than mere typological. I'm just gonna say typological for like the sake of arguments, I guess. Um, prophecies in Wisdom of Solomon. And then you find like interesting stuff in Sirach, especially that one part that I mentioned that like actually I don't think I've mentioned it too much or too well. and that is at the end when Sirach, Jesus ben Sirach, actually it's Jesus ben Sirah, but I always put like that at the end just because I love habits. Um, anyways, where he says like he tells like the unwise and uninstructed to go on to him, like to draw onto him. Actually, no, I think he's okay, to draw on to him and learn from him the ways of wisdom. In wisdom will like give them rest to like their souls. There's like a bunch of like parallels between those two. Yeah, it's an illusion, but it's more than just like a mere illusion where it's like, okay, yeah, he's kind of alluding here. It's more like something I think that's um it's central to the text in a way that like, oh shit, I'm not sure how to like precisely articulate this, but it's like it's not just merely to get a point across, but rather Sirach was onto something. And in the New Testament, Jesus is also called the wisdom of the Father. So there is, I feel like there's something. No, I shouldn't say it like that. I think there's something going on there where it's like there's this one guy called Jesus who talks about wisdom, and later on, Jesus comes on the spot and he's like he uses that same language from the Jesus talking about um, wisdom. And he says that like he himself is that wisdom because it's no longer in wisdom that he's telling people to go, but rather into his own hypostasis. So yeah, that's again, it's like clarification on my arguments for the Detroit canon, or not all of it, at least just Sirach in Wisdom of Solomon, which are like the only two like Detroit canonical books I would die on a hill for. I really like Tobit though, but I'm not too sure if I would die on a hill for Tobit. But there is that like interesting passage I showed in the episode that links it back to the back to Revelation. So that's again interesting. Yeah. I'll probably in the next podcast episode like think about this more and just figure out how to articulate that more. But like I do think I might be onto something. I just don't know how to articulate it well. I took public speaking like freshman year. IBS'd it. Shouldn't have, but I did. Not my proudest moment. But I ended up like I was supposed to fail. Ended up not somehow. But yeah. No, but I ended up passing when I really shouldn't have. Um but yeah, that happened, I guess. Um yeah, then interesting enough, I'm not gonna like talk too much about this because it's like I'm almost done with this, and it's kind of like a bigger discussion. But like one of my friends did, the one friend I was talking about Detroit Canon with on campus, also brought up first no Second Timothy 3. It's the last two verses the um of the second of the third chapter of the second epistle to Timothy, and he uses this to argue for sola scriptura. I don't think it works. And again, this is goes like the broader discussion, and why I'm not going to talk about it here. I might bring it up in the podcast episode or something, but anyways. But the point I want to get across here is that like the writing in Greek seems to indicate that like what's Paul like for in context, Paul isn't talking about all of Scripture because like all of Scripture doesn't exist yet because he's still is writing the New Testament. Rather, it seems that he's talking about the Old Testament. Um, so he's talking about the Old Testament, and he says that the scriptures that Timothy has been like accustomed to hearing since he was a little kid, since he was a child, and what's interesting about this, it's in Acts. I forget which chapter, but in Acts, in Acts of the Apostles, we learned that Timothy is a Hellenistic Jew. So the scriptures he would have grown up with wouldn't be the Hebrew text, but rather the Septuagint. And I bring this up also because the New Testament also, whenever it quotes the Old Testament, mainly quotes from the Septuagint. Given you have some exceptions, like Matthew tends to quote from a Hebrew. Actually, no. He quotes from a Hebrew text sometimes. Sometimes he quotes from the Septuagint. Sometimes he quotes from an Aramaic text. But besides him, everyone else seems to quote from the Septuagint. So it's interesting. And there are I showed this. I did show this in the Divine Council episode that there are differences between these two texts. So yeah. I'm just trying to. But yeah. I mean, I feel like that can also be thought up as a argument for the Deuterocanon, though I'm reluctant to say that because one can argue that Paul only has in mind the not they can I'm saying the Old Testament's what he has in mind, but someone can make the argument. I'm not sure how successful they would be, but could make an argument saying that what Paul is referring to isn't the Old Testament, but rather just the Torah, the first 5 books of Moses. So I don't know. I would have to consult a bunch of commentaries before I can tell you guys my opinion on that. But yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I started my final semester of undergrad on Monday. It's fun. I'm taking 4 500 level classes just because I thought it would be over the top. So yeah, it's gonna be fun. And then a reason why I'm not looking at the camera first is because I always find it weird to make eye contact. I don't know why. My hair looks weird here. I wish it would go back. I don't know. My hair looks weird too. I just noticed that, but it's quodest. It's not the end of the world or anything. But yeah, it's gonna be fun. If you're wondering what those 5 classes are, it's philosophy of mind, philosophy of religion, the analytic turn, and that's just a class on early analytic philosophy and aesthetics. And I'm also taking this political philosophy class, but that's again a 300 level class. So yeah, and this is the finished product. I mean, not really. This is only one part of this. Is a I forget what they're called. They do show up in Star Wars a few times. But yeah. Then you have a turret and a speeder bike for the clones. And then you have a stab speeder for the droids. You get 2 regular droids, and you get 3 super battle droids. You get 3 normal clones, and the 4th is a shock trooper. Though I might want to give him the rifle for this, just because he looks cooler like that.